What if I told you the best way to actually get out of your climate anxiety rut is by getting really, really angry? Hi, I'm Kenna from the Ara Project, and today we're going to be talking about environmental rage and various different environmental emotions. I want to start this off by sharing that I am a climate activist. I have been for the past 7 years of my life. And throughout those 7 years, I've kind of seen different educational events. I've spoken at different schools, I've hosted different workshops, and at every single time that I've been given the stage as a speaker or a moderator, the question that I see by far the most, especially coming from young people, is how do you deal with climate anxiety? Especially being a peer to peer communicator, being a young person myself, I understand why this question kind of seems natural to ask. And my answer is always renditions of the same thing. It's through action. Eco anxiety, and I just want to take this time to give my own definition, right? Eco anxiety to me is this feeling of looming threat. It's it's threatening your life, but it kind of takes a seat in the back of your mind constantly. Similar to regular anxiety, right? We feel nervous, we feel scared, we feel fear, but this is all related to future environmental catastrophe or even closer environmental catastrophes like bagyos or droughts that could happen within the next year. Now, this eco anxiety can often feel very large, larger than life, even. We're talking about really big players here. We're talking about giants. We're talking about companies that are connected with government. We're talking about companies that literally change the systems in which we operate. And so to feel like that's what you're up against, it can be very, very paralyzing. And more than that, it can feel like you have no control over your own life and your own future. And granted, you probably don't have control of world markets or the globe or the entire country that you're living in, but you do have control over yourself, your household, your friends, the way you speak, the way you understand things, and most importantly, your community, right? And so this is why I always recommend action as kind of an antidote for climate anxiety. For me, it allows us to take back the power and the control that these larger than life giants make us feel like we don't have a part in. And I think when we start to chip away at that power, we feel less and less anxious. Today, though, we're not only going to be talking about anxiety or climate anger. I want to talk about a lot of different, very popular notions of climate beliefs and climate emotions. So, since we talked about climate anxiety, next up, I want to talk about climate doomism. For those that aren't familiar, climate doomism is the idea that we are too far gone. There's nothing left to do about climate change. So it acknowledges the existence of climate change, but it acknowledges the grandiosity of climate change as a problem, right? It says it's so big, there's nothing else we can do to combat it. Climate denial, on the other hand, is saying that there is no climate change. Climate denial basically tells us that climate change doesn't exist. But climate doomism says that climate change does exist. In fact, it exists to such an extent that there is nothing left to do. And so this may seem like they're on opposite sides of the spectrum, but in actuality, they both end up at the same bottom of the horseshoe, which is that do nothing. Continue business as usual. One says business as usual because there's no climate change, and the other one says business as usual because there is climate change, but there's nothing we can do about it. And so I hope you're catching on to the issue here, which is that both do not encourage positive action. But what about an emotion that does encourage positive action? One that's being talked about a lot recently. And right now we're going to talk about hope. So, I want to talk about hope as a sustaining power for movements, specifically in this piece called Practicing Hope, Learning from Social Movements and Strategies in the Philippines. I want to go to the eighth page right over here. So, this quote is what to me really exemplifies what I think about hope. Hope itself is found in the creation and sustenance of bridges, relationships, and belongings associated with multiple convergences across but not negating difference. This kind of allows us to remember that hope is almost a natural subsect of action, right? When you act, when you interact with these amazing people, at least in my own experience, right? I'm interacting with these literally amazing, hardworking, accomplished, and passionate young people. It's impossible to not really feel hopeful about that. Like, so many people are working towards the same goal, and that's something to be hopeful about. And I do agree that hope truly is integral to sustaining a movement. We need to continue to be hopeful to combat that sense of doomism, especially the more we learn about the issue, the more it can feel like it bogs us down. And so, hope really is something that we need to latch onto as a sustaining movement. However, I don't think hope necessarily makes us start, right? Hope can help us stay, but what makes us start? And this is where I want to talk about eco anger. This is a systematic review and meta analysis of the relationship of eco emotions on the mental health and well being of young adults. And I want to specifically go over to the prevalence of eco emotions bit. So, over here, we have eco anxiety and eco anger kind of differentiated. So, eco anxiety over here is in this study, they really do key into the fact that it's rising, right? And across different metrics, across different ways of measuring eco anxiety, it definitely exists and especially exists larger and more in countries that experience a lot of environmental impacts. With eco anger, however, they only found two studies, but studies link eco anger with pro environmental behaviors and greater pro environmental behaviors at that. I think the difference for me between eco anxiety and eco anger is that anxiety is a kind of natural co product of experiencing all these disasters, right? You experience one typhoon and it's so bad, it's natural to feel anxious about the next one. But anger comes from a place of wanting change, of needing change, of understanding who causes these problems. And so now I want to really quickly talk about eco anger as a political tool. Now, environmental anger helps us notice injustice and identify who is responsible. And this is from Nancy Thresher from her study, Get Angry About Climate Change, which we'll be talking about right now. So, this is a really, really good philosophical paper about eco anger and specifically, what I want to talk about in this study, and you can read it on your own, but this is the one I read the most in depth. I want to talk about Thresher's two conditions for productive anger. Number one is the right targets, and number two is realistic or actionable impacts. Now, in terms of right targets, right, this is really, really important to me because eco anger is only going to be productive shot at the right place, right? If we put eco anger back on ourselves, we're basically just doing eco anxiety all over again. Like we are going back to that state of paralysis because we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot here. And so it's important to recognize that although eco anger is productive, in a lot of cases, it cannot be productive when it is targeted at the self, at small communities, at individual regular people, because it doesn't work that way. Ultimately, getting angry at yourself for not doing the most sustainable thing and not making the most sustainable choice will not actually push you forward in terms of a political force to fight for better, to demand for a better system, a better world, and a better future for different people and different groups, right? And so this is the part where we really have to talk about the targets of eco anger, which should be the large corporations, our government, our the businesses, the false practices, the issues that actually come within these systems, right? And I want to talk really quickly tangent on the concept of passion. I've always been a very passionate person, specifically about the environment. I feel very, very lucky to be passionate because being passionate helps me understand the world through a very specific lens, a lens of wanting to do something for a specific cause. And it's something that people around me have really commended me for, finding my passion at a very young age. And I guess that's one of the other questions I get, not from workshops or talks, but from intimate conversations with the people in my life. They ask me, how do I know what I'm passionate about? And I always say, I know what I'm passionate about because I'm really, really angry about it. Like, I think the way you can find and pinpoint your passion is by finding something that makes you so angry you physically cannot ignore it. And so that target should never be yourself, and it should never be your community. The target of your eco anger should always be the systems that cause our environmental degradation, our extraction, the downfall of nature, of um, our warming and cooling systems, our water systems. And the second one is a focus on impacts that are realistic and achievable. Now, this is the part where I see a lot of people, including myself, get wrong, right? So you have the right target, but now your dreams are kind of so high up in the clouds that when you don't reach them, it's disappointing. And that's so normal and that's such a natural reaction that I myself have had time and time again, right? When I feel like I want to change this and I want to do this thing and I want to do this larger than life kind of change. But ultimately, we need to understand that as an individual, even as a community, we need to be realistic with what we can achieve. And while revolution and the idea of these really big changes are amazing, they should be north stars and guiding posts instead of goals, let's say, right? It's important that we look at the changes that we want to make in terms of what can we do? What can we make? Right? And I want to tie this back to in the very beginning of this video when I was talking about that jumping point to action. So, to feel that you've gotten that power back, to actually take some of that power back, you need to finish a climate action, kind of. And I don't think finish is the right word, but you kind of have to fulfill it beginning to end. Think of the idea, do it, finish it, whatever, it's over. And obviously, climate action is a constantly continuing journey, but there has to be some sort of cyclical movement, and you have to at least finish a cycle to feel like, okay, I've gotten that power back. And if your goals are too big, you never actually finish that initial cycle of change. And so, yes, keep your goals big, but start small. Start in your community, start at your household, even, right? For example, if my goal is to overthrow the government, might not be able to do it, but if my goal is like composting my food once a week, I got it. First week, I'm already feeling like I took the power back. You know what I mean? And not only do you feel like that, you are taking the power back in your own little way. And to end this, I want to talk about from rage to community, right? We aren't meant to fix the climate crisis alone. And I think this is what really helped me in separating those big ideas and goals from what I can do. It's understanding that in the line against these big giants, I'm not going to be the last domino that is going to make everything collapse. I'm one domino in a long line of people before me, in front of me, and with me that are fighting for change and fighting for a better future for all of us. And so rage doesn't have to be loud. It can come with poetry, art, and collective action. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you get angry today. I hope you do something, no matter how small. Write a poem, scribble on a piece of paper, let those emotions out, organize something in your community. Every little small thing does matter. And if you want to help me out, consider subscribing or liking the video or commenting. It would mean the world to me. These are not the most well edited videos, but they come from my heart and soul. And so if you're watching this, thank you so much. And yeah, stay cool.